you know this movie. You've seen the poster. You remember that grinning skull with the gold tooth and the sunglasses. You probably laughed at the wild-eyed mortician. Maybe you watched it at a sleepover. The lights off, popcorn going cold in your hands. You thought it was just a horror movie, a fun, spooky, over-the-top ride with monsters and gangsters and killer dolls. But here's the truth that nobody told you. Tales from the Hood was never what it appeared to be. And the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Today, we are cracking open the coffin on 28 weird, dark, and genuinely shocking facts about the 1995 cult classic Tales from the Hood. Facts about the hidden messages buried inside it, the real-life tragedies that followed the cast, the secrets encoded in the character names, and the one man without whom this film would never have existed. Stay with us all the way to the end, because fact number 28 is the one that changes how you see the entire film. Let's go. Fact 1. The movie poster was a deliberate lie. Let's start with what you saw before you ever watched a single frame. The Tales from the Hood marketing campaign was built around a skull wearing sunglasses and a gold tooth. Cool, fun, irreverent. The tagline? Chill or be chilled. It sounds like a movie you go to on a Friday night to laugh and scream with your friends. That was completely intentional and completely dishonest. Director Rusty Cundiff and his co-writer Darren Scott never wanted to make a comedy horror film. They wanted to make something far more serious, far more confrontational, and far more dangerous. But they knew that if they marketed it honestly, as a film about police brutality, systemic racism, domestic violence, and the self-destruction of gang culture, a large chunk of their potential audience would have stayed home. So they did something brilliant. They hid the medicine inside the candy. They packaged a social manifesto as a B-movie horror anthology. The joke was on the audience, and by the time they realized what they were really watching, it was too late. They were already invested. The marketing campaign was a mask, and what was underneath it was something Hollywood had almost never seen before. Fact 2. Rusty Cundiff called it a redemptive horror film. This is the term Cundiff himself used when describing what he was trying to make. Not a comedy, not a parody, not even a straightforward horror, a redemptive horror film. The concept was radical. Use the horror genre, with all its supernatural monsters and jump scares and grotesque imagery, as a vehicle for confronting real-world nightmares. The ghosts aren't just ghosts. The monsters aren't just monsters. They are metaphors for the very real terrors that the Black community faced in America every single day. Think about that for a second. Every single scary element in this film is actually a reflection of something true. Police officers who murder a community leader, a man who beats a child, a racist politician, a gangster drowning in the consequences of his own violence. These aren't fictional horror scenarios. These are the nightly news, dressed up in movie makeup. Cundiff's genius was in understanding that the horror genre was the perfect delivery mechanism. Because horror makes you feel things before your brain has time to rationalize them away. You experience the dread in your body. And when that dread is connected to something real, something historical, something ongoing, it hits completely different. Fact 3. The film almost never got made. Here is where the story gets really interesting. In the mid-1990s, Hollywood was not exactly rushing to greenlight horror films about systemic racism. The idea of a studio executive reading this script and enthusiastically writing a check is almost impossible to imagine. Rusty Cundiff was a talented but relatively unknown director. He had made a smaller film before this, but he did not have the clout or the connections to walk into a major studio and demand $6 million for a film this bold, this political, this challenging. Which means the entire existence of Tales from the Hood, every single thing you love about it, came down to one phone call. And we'll get to that in just a moment, because the person on the other end of that phone call is fact number 4. Fact 4. Spike Lee is the reason this movie exists. You read that correctly. Without Spike Lee, Tales from the Hood does not exist. Full stop. Spike Lee's production company, 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks, was the engine behind the film's financing. But it wasn't just the money. It was the name. It was the credibility. It was the weight that Spike Lee's involvement carried in the industry. Cundiff has spoken openly about this, saying the movie got made because of Spike and that his involvement was, simply put, everything. Here's the detail that really illustrates the power of that connection. When a representative from the Bond company, the firm responsible for ensuring that the film would actually get finished, came to meet with Cundiff, the man was visibly skeptical. He was being asked to put significant money behind a young, relatively unproven director. He was nervous. And then the office phone rang. The assistant announced that Spike Lee was calling for Rusty. That was the end of the conversation. The Bond company representative's entire demeanor changed. The name Spike Lee on that phone call was worth more than any pitch, any reel, any meeting could ever be. It was an invisible endorsement that said, "This project matters, and serious people are behind it." Spike Lee did not just put his name on the poster. He used his hard-earned power to protect a film that other people were too afraid to make. And he did it again when the sequels were produced years later, returning as a producer to ensure the legacy continued. Fact 5. The film had a bigger star and more money than CB4, but came out after it. This one might surprise you. In the early 1990s, there was a wave of black-led comedy and hip-hop adjacent films hitting theaters. CB4, the Chris Rock hip-hop parody film, came out in 1993. By all accounts, Tales from the Hood had a bigger name attached to it and a larger budget. It should have come out first. It didn't. And while the exact reasons are layered in the complicated machinery of Hollywood distribution and studio politics, the delay meant that Tales from the Hood entered a market that had already seen some of the energy around that wave start to shift. And yet, it endured. While many films from that era have faded, Tales from the Hood is still being talked about, studied, screened, and analyzed nearly 3 decades later. The delay may have hurt its initial commercial moment, but it didn't touch its legacy. Fact 6. Clarence Williams III didn't take the role for fame or money. Now let's talk about the heart of the film, Mr. Sims, the bug-eyed, cackling, terrifyingly unpredictable mortician who serves as the film's narrator and guide through the underworld. This is one of the most memorable horror performances in 1990s cinema, and it was delivered by a man named Clarence Williams III. But here is the secret most people never knew. Clarence Williams III didn't take this role for the paycheck or the exposure. He took it because he had something to say. Williams was genuinely alarmed by the violence he saw tearing through black communities in America. He saw the toll of gang culture. He saw young men destroying each other. And he believed, deeply believed, that his performance as Mr. Sims could serve as a wake-up call. He saw the horror genre as a megaphone for a moral message. He wasn't playing a villain for fun. He was playing a consequence. Mr. Sims isn't just a weird old mortician. He is the universe's reckoning, the figure who appears when the bill finally comes due. And Williams understood that if he could make Mr. Sims terrifying enough, unforgettable enough, real enough, then the message might actually land. That kind of intentionality is rare in any performance. In a horror film, it's almost unheard of. Fact 7. Clarence Williams III turned down black exploitation films at the height of his fame. Here's what makes Clarence Williams III even more remarkable. After he became a major star in the 1960s and 70s on the groundbreaking TV show The Mod Squad, Hollywood came calling with all kinds of offers. Blaxploitation films were exploding in popularity, and studios were eager to put recognizable black faces in them. Williams turned them all down. His reasoning was clear and principled. He felt the characters were one-dimensional. He refused to play stereotypes, even when those roles would have made him significantly richer and more famous. Instead of chasing easy money, he went back to the theater and was nominated for a Tony Award, the highest honor in the world of Broadway. This is a man who, at the peak of his cultural moment, chose integrity over opportunity. So when he finally agreed to play Mr. Sims, you know he saw something in the script that resonated at the deepest level. He wasn't collecting a check, he was making a statement. Fact 8. Clarence Williams III was in Purple Rain. Before he terrorized gangsters as Mr. Sims, Clarence Williams III played one of the most emotionally complex roles of his career, the tormented, abusive father of the musician known as the Kid in Purple Rain, the 1984 film starring Prince. Think about what that means for a moment. He played Prince's father. He was part of one of the most culturally significant music films ever made. And then, a decade later, He turned around and delivered what many consider an even more iconic performance in Tales from the Hood. His career was a consistent study in choosing roles with weight, with meaning, with something real underneath the surface. Fact 9. Clarence Williams III passed away on June 4, 2021. This is where the story turns heavy. After decades of brilliant work, horror, comedy, drama, Broadway, television, Clarence Williams III passed away on June 4, 2021, following a battle with colon cancer. He was 81 years old. The tributes poured in from every corner of the entertainment world. People remembered him as Link Hayes from the Mod Squad, as the father in Purple Rain, as the goofy thief Samson Simpson from Half-Baked, as the powerful crime boss in American Gangster, as the unsettling presence in Twin Peaks. But for a generation of horror fans, he will always be Mr. Sims, the mortician who knew your name before you even walked through the door. His death was a genuine loss, a 5-decade career marked by discipline, artistry, and the refusal to compromise. He told you the truth in that funeral home, and he never stopped telling the truth. Fact 10. The villain's name was a secret attack on real white supremacists. Now here's where the hidden messages in the film start to reveal themselves, and they are deeply intentional. The racist politician in the story, KKK comeuppance, is named Duke Meter. Most audiences heard that name and moved on, but it wasn't a random name. It was a code. Duke, as in David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan who ran for political office in Louisiana. Meter, a deliberate misspelling pointing to Tom Metzger, the founder of the White Aryan Resistance, one of the most virulently racist organizations in modern American history. The filmmakers took two of the most notorious real-life white supremacists in the country, combined their names, and created a fictional politician. They were saying explicitly that the character on screen was not just a movie villain. He was a type. He was real. He was already in office somewhere. That is a bold, dangerous, and brilliant piece of filmmaking. Fact 11. Corbin Bernsen played the racist politician, and it was a deliberate contrast. The man cast to play Duke Meter was Corbin Bernsen, one of the biggest TV stars in America at the time, thanks to the legal drama L.A. Law. Bernsen was known as the handsome, charming, pretty boy face of that show, and he had spent his entire career battling that label. Taking on the role of a ridiculous, buffoonish, genuinely hateful, racist politician was the furthest thing possible from his TV image, and that was exactly why the director wanted him. The goal was to make Duke Meter not purely terrifying, but also somewhat laughable, a goofy, pompous fool who thinks he is powerful and is about to be proven very, very wrong. That comedic quality made him feel less like a movie monster and more like a recognizable human being, which made his punishment at the hands of the haunted dolls all the more satisfying. Bernsen didn't shy away from how uncomfortable the role was. He leaned into it, and the result is one of the more memorable villain performances in the film. Fact 12. Corbin Bernsen now makes faith-based movies. This one genuinely surprises people. After his run in Tales from the Hood, Major League, and the beloved comedy detective show Psych, Corbin Bernsen stepped back from the Hollywood machine he grew increasingly frustrated with and pivoted almost entirely to making faith-based films centered on his Christian beliefs. The man who played one of cinema's most openly hateful racists now makes movies about grace, love, and redemption. There is something almost poetic about that arc, and something that speaks to the very themes Tales from the Hood was wrestling with: the possibility of transformation, the weight of consequence, the space between who you are and who you choose to become. Fact 13. Corbin Bernsen owns over 8,000 snow globes. We need a palate cleanser here, and this one delivers. Corbin Bernsen is the owner of one of the largest private snow globe collections in the entire world. We are talking over 8,000 snow globes. Shelves upon shelves, rooms dedicated to tiny winter landscapes encased in glass. Nobody saw that coming, but here we are. Fact 14. David Alan Grier was cast specifically because he was the last person you'd expect. Now we come to what might be the most psychologically clever casting decision in the entire film. The story Boys Do Get Bruised centers on a child named Walter who is being terrorized by his mother's violent boyfriend, a man named Carl. This is the most emotionally brutal segment of the film. There are no supernatural elements here, just the very real, very common horror of domestic abuse. The man they cast as Carl was David Alan Grier. In 1995, David Alan Grier was one of the most beloved comedians in America. He was a breakout star of In Living Color, making millions of people laugh every week. He was funny, warm, accessible, safe. The filmmakers understood that casting a face audiences trusted, a face associated with laughter and lightness, in the role of a child abuser would shatter any protective distance viewers might try to maintain. You couldn't watch Carl and say, "That's just a monster." The monster was wearing the face of someone you knew, someone you liked. It was a way of saying, abusers don't look like strangers. They look like people we welcome into our lives. That is not just clever filmmaking. That is a genuinely important message delivered with surgical precision. Fact 15. David Alan Grier's performance remains one of his most shocking. For someone whose entire brand was built on comedy, the depth of Grier's turn as Carl in Tales from the Hood remains genuinely unsettling. It revealed a dimension to his talent that his comedy work had never required him to show. He played Carl with a frightening ordinariness, not as a raging monster, but as a man who believed he was entitled to his violence. Grier has had a long and celebrated career since films, Broadway, animated voice work on the Great North. But fans of Tales from the Hood have never forgotten what he showed them in that segment. He earned a kind of respect from that performance that no comedy sketch could have delivered. Fact 16. The character names were all secret messages. We already talked about Duke Meter, but the filmmakers hid coded names throughout the entire film, and once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. The civil rights activist and city councilman murdered by corrupt police in the first story is named Martin Ezekiel Morehouse. Break that down. Martin, as in Martin Luther King Jr. Morehouse, a deliberate nod to Morehouse College, one of the most historically significant HBCUs in America, and an institution deeply tied to the civil rights movement. This character wasn't just a fictional victim. He was a composite, a symbol. He represented every black leader who has been silenced by the very systems that were supposed to protect the community. Then there's Dr. Cushing, the cold and clinical scientist overseeing the experimental prison program. That name is almost certainly a reference to Peter Cushing, one of the most iconic actors in the history of horror cinema, best known for his work in Hammer horror films. It's a wink to the genre's history, hidden inside a scene about institutional violence. Every name in this film is doing double duty. Nothing is accidental. Fact 17. The song, Strange Fruit, was not just atmospheric. During the brutal murder of Martin Morehouse at the hands of corrupt police officers, a haunting melody drifts over the scene. If you don't know what you're hearing, it sounds like a mournful, atmospheric piece of music, the kind of thing horror films often use to create dread. But that song is Strange Fruit, performed by Billie Holiday, and it is one of the most devastating protest songs ever written. Strange Fruit was first recorded in 1939. It describes with horrifying poetry the lynching of black men in the American South. The strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees in the song are human bodies. It is a song about terror, about murder, about the systematic destruction of black life. By placing that song over a scene of modern police brutality, the filmmakers were making an argument that could not be made more plainly. This is not a new problem. What you are watching is not a 1990s phenomenon. It is a continuation, a repetition, the same hatred, wearing new clothes, one song, one scene, a through line across more than 50 years of American history. That is extraordinary filmmaking. Fact 18. The film explicitly referenced A Clockwork Orange. In the final story, Hardcore Convert, the gangster Crazy K is strapped into a chair and forced to watch a disturbing montage of images as part of his behavioral modification treatment. The imagery and setup are a direct intentional reference to the infamous Ludovico technique in Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. But where Kubrick used that scene to explore questions of free will and state control, Tales from the Hood used it to make a completely different and far more specific argument. The montage that Crazy K is forced to watch mixes footage of his own gang violence with real historical photographs of lynchings and racist atrocities. The connection being drawn is uncomfortable. It is meant to be. Fact 19. The film's most controversial message still divides people today. This is the one. This is the argument at the center of Tales from the Hood that no one really wants to have, but the filmmakers forced viewers to have anyway. By mixing Crazy K's gang violence footage with images of lynching and historical racial terror, the film was making an explicit argument. Black-on-black violence serves the same structural purpose as white supremacist violence. When members of a community destroy each other, they do the work of those who hate them. For some viewers, this was a necessary, powerful, and deeply moral message, a wake-up call, an indictment of a cycle that claimed too many young lives. For others, it was deeply problematic, a false equivalence that placed the burden of historical violence onto the victims of that history, and that compared vastly different phenomena in a way that felt reductive and unfair. This debate has not resolved. It is still happening, and the fact that a horror film from 1995 is still generating this level of genuine intellectual conflict is a testament to how seriously its creators took their craft. Fact 20. Lamont Bentley had a beloved TV career before his tragic death. The gangster Crazy K, the most complex and conflicted character in the film, was played by Lamont Bentley. Outside of Tales from the Hood, Bentley was best known to audiences as Hakeem Campbell, the funny, lovable best friend on the hit sitcom Moesha. He was a talented, magnetic screen presence with what appeared to be a long and successful career ahead of him. He was 31 years old. Fact 21. Lamont Bentley's death was devastating and sudden. On the night of January 19, 2005, Lamont Bentley was driving alone in California. Witnesses reported that his car was moving at high speed when it exited the freeway. He lost control. The vehicle crashed through a fence and rolled down a hill. Bentley was thrown from the car and onto the freeway itself, where he was struck by 5 separate vehicles in the darkness. He died instantly. The entertainment world was shaken. A young man full of talent and life, gone in a single terrible moment. And for fans of Tales from the Hood, the haunting dimension of it was impossible to ignore. He had played a character consumed by violence and hunted by the ghosts of those he'd harmed, and he himself had met a violent, shocking end. Was it a curse? Probably not, but the symmetry was difficult to shake. Fact 22. Rosalind Cash was already dying when she filmed her scenes. This is perhaps the most haunting fact in this entire list. Rosalind Cash, the veteran actress who played the cold Dr. Cushing in the film's final segment, was a deeply respected figure in Hollywood. She had starred in classics like The Omega Man, had a long-running role on General Hospital, and was known as someone who brought genuine power and authority to every performance. What almost no one knew at the time was that Rosalind Cash was gravely ill. She was fighting cancer as she filmed her scenes for Tales from the Hood. She knew what was happening to her. She came to set anyway. She gave the performance anyway. Tales from the Hood would be her final screen appearance. Fact 23. Rosalind Cash died on Halloween night, 1995. Tales from the Hood was released in May 1995. 5 months later, on October 31st, 1995, Halloween night, Rosalind Cash passed away. Read that again! An actress from a horror film, whose final performance was in that horror film, died on Halloween in the same year the film was released. The synchronicity of it is genuinely chilling. It isn't supernatural, but it doesn't need to be. The timing alone was enough to make people whisper. Fact 24. The curse. Theory around the film has persisted for decades. Between the death of Rosalind Cash on Halloween 1995 and the death of Lamont Bentley in 2005, fans and critics have long speculated about a dark shadow that seems to hang over certain cast members of Tales from the Hood. Is it a curse? Almost certainly not in any literal supernatural sense, but the word keeps appearing in conversations about this film, and the reason is clear. The film is about consequence. It is about actions catching up to people. It is about violence circling back, and when real tragedy struck the people who brought it to life, it felt, whether logically or not, like the film's own themes had reached out beyond the screen. Fact 25. Tom Wright, who played Martin Morehouse, also appeared in Creepshow 2. The actor who played the murdered civil rights figure Martin Morehouse was Tom Wright, and horror fans may recognize him from another legendary anthology film, Creepshow 2, the 1987 follow-up to Stephen King and George Romero's iconic original. Wright, playing a civil rights martyr in one horror anthology, and a man haunted in another speaks to a career built in the genre, but always with intelligence and depth behind the choices. Fact 26. The film was made for $6 million, and it earned its budget back. In an era when Hollywood blockbusters were ballooning in cost, Tales from the Hood was made for a lean $6 million. Given what the film accomplished, the performances it extracted, the sets it built, the special effects it deployed, and the cultural conversation it generated, that budget is remarkable. And it performed. It earned back its production costs and became a cult staple that has continued generating revenue through home video, streaming, and re-releases across 3 decades. It also spawned sequels, Tales from the Hood 2, 2018, and Tales from the Hood 3, 2020, both produced with Spike Lee's involvement. For a film that Hollywood nearly didn't make, its commercial life has been quietly impressive. Fact 27. The sequels were made over 2 decades later with the original team. The fact that Tales from the Hood 2 arrived in 2018, 23 years after the original, is itself a remarkable statement about the film's endurance. Rusty Cundiff returned to direct. Spike Lee returned to produce. The commitment to the original vision was preserved. Both sequels continued the anthology format and the blend of horror with pointed social commentary, tackling new nightmares while staying true to the world the first film created. The sequels are not as universally celebrated as the original, but their existence is a tribute to what that original film built. Fact 28. The real horror was always outside the theater. And here we are. Fact number 28, the one that reframes everything. Throughout this entire video, we have been treating Tales from the Hood as a film, a product, a piece of entertainment with interesting behind-the-scenes trivia. And it is all of those things. But Rusty Cundiff's deepest intention was something more unsettling. He wanted the horror you watched on screen to follow you out of the theater and into the parking lot, into your car, into your home, into your daily life. The police brutality in the first story? That was already happening in real cities before the film came out, and it has continued happening every year since. The domestic violence in the second story? It is the most underreported crime in the country. The racist politician in the third story? Look at any election cycle in any state. The gangster trapped in the cycle of violence in the fourth story? That is a real community. Those are real families. Those are real funerals. The characters in Tales from the Hood end up in a literal hell. But the film's final, most devastating argument is that the hell was never just fictional. It was happening right now, outside that theater, in the world you were about to walk back into. Mr. Sims wasn't just a weird mortician with bug eyes and a gold tooth. He was a warning system. He was the universe saying, "You were shown this. Now you can't say you didn't know." Tales from the Hood is 30 years old, and not a single one of the problems it screamed about has gone away. The horror didn't stop when the credits rolled. It never does. So, which of these facts hit you the hardest? Did you know about the hidden names? Did you catch the strange fruit connection? And what do you think about that final, most controversial message? Drop your answer in the comments. And if someone you know thinks this was just a silly horror movie, share this video with them, because now you know better. Until next time, stay curious, stay awake, and whatever you do, don't go into the funeral home.